Planet Dolan.
Alright, Danger Dolan. I interviewed John Staats, who used to work at Blizzard. He helped design a lot of the dungeons in World of Warcraft during the vanilla days. I haven't done any World of Warcraft videos in quite a long time, but I couldn't pass this opportunity up. He launched a Kickstarter for a book that goes into detail about the development of vanilla WoW. I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy of the book, read it the whole way through, absolutely loved it. So I hopped on a call with John and we did a Q&A, so I hope you guys enjoy. As you'll notice in the call, my microphone either picked up mono sound coming from me, but hopefully it's not too big of a deal. The first question I asked is the classic WoW servers that are coming out from Blizzard eventually, and this is his response.
It's gonna be a long... Let me tell you something.
Sure.
I got the inside skinny on that. It's gonna be a long time, dude. They got to rebuild that game. They got to rebuild the game. Like, it's and the amount. Think of what kind of developers they would have to get to work on a game that's already been made. Like, who would want to work on that? You know, it's they're gonna have to wring some arms to get people onto that project, because that, I mean, it's been incrementally changed. Every patch, every correction, the hot updates, you know, the live, what do they call them, hot fixes. I have a feeling it's going to be a long time before Classic WoW actually comes out. And
just to go through some of my notes and just about the book a little bit. So just to start off, you mentioned that you had the pain in your hands and that it kind of prevents you from typing. And so you wrote the whole book with voice to text, is that right?
yeah, I what it does is, it's an undiagnosed condition. It doesn't show up. I've had every scan in the world, multiple times, still getting blood tests, and it limits my computer usage. I can type very quickly, but I can't do it 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day. It started out with voice to text to get the raw stuff in there, and then was the editing, and rounds and rounds and rounds of editing. And so that's kind of how it happened. It was many rounds of editing. I'll never write another nonfiction book. My goodness, this was so hard to do.
Yeah, no, that's really incredible that you did that. There's so much material in this. You know, over 300 pages of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's extremely well written.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So no, I was just amazed to read that, and I think that came through at the very end. You had just an epilogue message about it. So yeah, I was really surprised to hear that. And something that I really liked about the book actually is he kind of cleared up all the developer jargon like pretty early on. Like, you know, like the term doodad, which I came up when I was editing some Warcraft 3 maps back in the day. I first learned about that going through all the code, and then I saw the Shane cube littered everywhere.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised to see was in WoW as well.
Yeah. It's funny, the phrase doodad, it's only a Blizzard term, and I think it just came from its legacy from, I think Blizzard strays away. They call it a prop now, which is what the rest of the industry calls it. But doodad, they started out with doing RTSs, and so it's kind of funny, like the quote by Colin that says every company's worst game is going to be their first 3D game. And it's because they think in 2D terms. They try to apply what they've learned. And doodad is something you would sprinkle on your map, like in Warcraft 3 or StarCraft. The bushes, you know, the tire tracks that are in the dirt. They were just little details. And in a fully 3D environment, you know, a tree is a doodad, and it could be a giant tree, and it didn't quite apply. Some of the tools from Warcraft 3 were used for WoW. So yeah. I had editors making sure that I explained all the computer jargon and stuff like that.
It was very helpful. And yeah, we all had to suffer through the PlayStation 1 and 64 era where they were just kind of learning. And as you said, like, they thought they knew what they were doing, but a lot of the times they were kind of wrong.
Oh yeah.
So you mentioned early in the book that when you got hired, you were using Radiant, and you did mention that you were working on it for quite a while. But they didn't know if they're going to use it. I don't know if you explicitly mentioned if they did end up using any of those early assets in the game or not.
Oh no, we threw every single
Oh,
stitch away. Let me
damn.
tell you something. It was, well, in 2000, okay, in the year 2000, there were no one was really building 3D architecture. No one had really figured it out other than the first person shooter games.
Hmm.
It was Quake, Unreal. There was a lot of stuff on console, but because they weren't using the same textures, we thought we would just follow the norm. And in everything we copied pretty much from the first person shooter uh, developer pipeline, the way things are textured, the way things were pathing geometry,
Mhm.
everything was wrong. And we had to develop it first internally and then go, oh, wow, this isn't going to work.
Hmm.
This is, and until we get it, I worked on Karazhan for like 4 months, and this is like, I would work from 10 o'clock to around maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, go home 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock at night, crazy hours working on Karazhan. It was so big we couldn't even compile it. We were planning on, and we were actually working on the old Quake 3 engine. Like when we wanted to look at a cave, we would load it up as a Quake 3 multiplayer map.
Hmm.
And that was basically, our tech lead, John Cash. He was id Software's network code guru. He basically got us, an evaluation copy of program and a lot of their technology that they give away, and we tried it and it did not work at all. But that was 6 months or 6 or 9 months down the tubes. I forget the title of that one chapter, but wow, that
Yeah,
sucked.
yeah, it was pretty brutal reading about that. But yeah, I understand. It's sometimes you just don't know. All you can do is just work on what the task you've been given, and I guess they'll let you know
Yeah,
later on if it's going to be handy. Um,
yeah.
so I had actually no idea. You mentioned that there was a game that Blizzard were working on. It was a mix between Diablo and the Gauntlet series. It's called Nomad.
Oh
Um,
yeah, Nomad.
yeah, and there was another game you mentioned called Dragons by Blizzard North. I honestly I've never heard about any of these before, and I
Oh
thought I was pretty in
no,
the know on
yeah.
this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, well this is the thing. Like my first week at Blizzard, it's like it was so, and this is actually the inspiration. It's not everything that I learned, and I did learn a lot. It's everything that I had to unlearn.
Hmm.
All the misconceptions that I had. Shooters were basically the only window into game development if you're on the outside. The plan updates by John Carmack, all the id Software superstars would just make these little daily logs of what they were doing, and Blizzard did everything opposite. So, yeah, it was Nomad was just a killed project. It was Blizzard kills projects internally. We killed Ghost twice during the development of WoW. When I got there, I found out that Pax Imperia 2, to go way back, was Pax Imperia was one of the Empire turn-based strategy franchises, and Blizzard had made Pax Imperia 2, but they had done real time at the time. Real time was all the rage, and everyone was turning their turn-based strategy games into real-time games. And well, in Blizzard's case, it was a space conquest game. But the problem is that everything was represented by numbers. And so when you apply that to the good thing about real time is you see this wonky little orc walking across to chop down some lumber. Okay, that's what real time. When you have just a matrix and you're watching numbers change, it's like watching a spreadsheet in real time. It was a horrible game. And they were going to kill it. And then THQ approached Blizzard and say, hey, we'll buy that off you.
Oh wow.
And Blizzard's like, okay. And they released it, and it just felt like I remember my roommate at the time. I was living in New York City at the time. He was writing notes. We were gaming fans. He was writing these long notes to the developers trying to explain what they did wrong. And here it was. They just bought it from Blizzard and, probably changed a couple things and then launched it, thought it was going to be more Blizzard Gold. And ooh, no. Yeah. But yeah, Dragons was Blizzard North had done a number of things. Like they had, oh my gosh, you can't even imagine how many times they restarted Diablo 3. Just Star Blow was another thing they were going to do. A space version of. They just had little teams working on stuff, and not too much success, which is kind of why the studio saw its end. But yeah, Blizzard. The great thing about Blizzard is that they're smart enough and they're in a position where they can hide their mistakes. They're not forced into like a contract that they have to ship something that doesn't work.
Yeah, you went extensively talking about how much kind of you admire Blizzard in one of the chapters, and that felt very passionate and very true, which it makes you like the company even more when somebody works there. Says so many nice things about it.
Oh yeah,
and their philosophies and everything, and yeah, it's very convincing, very correct. And I guess that's why we all play their games. We all love the company.
yeah, and it's funny. Like, and Blizzard is such under a blanket of scrutiny. Like that is probably the one thing that struck me the most is that the fans on the internet, you couldn't find any forum post that the fan had actually guessed correctly what was the reason why we did things. Like why did Blizzard sell Vivendi, or why did Vivendi sell Blizzard to Activision? Like why did that even happen? Just we look at the forums just to see if anybody figures it out, and it's there's conspiracy theories, even all the crazy stuff you wade through, and people imagine there's bridges where there really aren't. They make connections that really aren't there.
Yeah,
And it was
the popular thing is to blame everything on Activision. Activision ruined Blizzard for X reason.
Oh
Happens all
God.
the time.
It's funny. It was just a stock swap. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Nothing changed at all.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a convenient scapegoat, more or less.
Yeah. I had a roommate, actually one of my coworkers. We shared an office together. He just got a job to Blizzard. He had been in the industry for 8 years, and every time he moved to a company, they'd been acquired by Activision and killed. Okay, and he gets to Blizzard, and I was like, dude, trust me, it's not good. He'd worked for 8 years. He had never shipped a title. He had never shipped a title because marketing decisions come in, and that's another big thing. I'm a strong advocate for marketing, but marketing is good when you're doing company negotiations. They know what the landscape is in the industry. They're like I say, I describe them. They're your intelligence officers. They'll tell you what's going on, what that company wants out of they're essential. But what's problem is that they're also very good salesmen, very good executives, and when they try to apply their knowledge, the problem is they get everything they know from the internet. So they believe what they read, unfortunately. They'll say, oh, this program, this time-saving application will be great. You should try this thing out. It's because they've read a bunch of glowing reviews about it. And once you try it out, you're like, oh, no, this doesn't apply to us. But when you have a very strong marketer, executive come in and make decisions based on, that. And I'm not joking. Like they'll come in and say, the skateboard dude for your, skateboard game, he's got to have blonde hair. The competing products got blue hair. We need to go more California. And they'll just make stuff up. And the development team that's they're looking at stuff under a microscope, okay? And the marketers, they see stuff through a telescope, okay? And it just doesn't apply to the minutia but unfortunately, well, fortunately for Blizzard, they're not in that situation. So
For sure. In the book, you mentioned that before launch they were looking at Nagas as a playable race. So,
yeah,
like today it's 2018. Do you think Blizzard are ever going to figure out a solution to Nagas not having legs for like armor?
yeah, I don't think so. I think that's what that spiral in the center between the two continents was. It's like a whirlpool graphic. If you ever look at it, that's
Okay.
supposed to be Nagitar. Okay, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The lore guys will get me on it, but that's where the Naga came from, and we were going to do an underwater city. We wanted really good water for the game. That's one thing. We were looking for things that a lot of MMOs didn't actually get really well, and water was one of them. And we were going to, we've got pretty good water, I mean, the fact that you could swim straight down and there was a swimming animation, I think even shooters, the animation was the player running upright, and that was their swimming animation when they're going through the water. When we showed, we had gotten used to it. We just showed somebody swimming down to a shipwreck in one of our promo movies, and the fans went berserk over two things: swimming toward something in the water, told them, wow, you're actually really swimming, and it looks like you're swimming. It's not just that and a waterfall. There was a waterfall, like the camera zooms into a waterfall, and everyone's like, cool. It's like, oh my God. But yeah.
Early 2000s was a different place.
Yeah, they'll never do no, I don't think they'll ever do the Naga. It's what they learned from the Druid is like the Druid, the forms. It's great, but like if you're tree form Druid, at least when I was playing, I haven't logged on to WoW since Cataclysm. That's when I stopped playing. I played a Druid. I never got to see my armor during the raid. And so if you don't actually get to see the armor pieces, it's less of a visceral feedback saying, I've now improved. I look a little bit different. I don't know if the Naga, they have also weird shoulders and the spikes on their back. There's more problems and plus the tail animations. They're going to have the animators don't like body parts clipping into walls. They don't like it's a really different. I don't think they'll go any. I don't think they'll be able to do anything but bipedal characters. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean they're getting pretty creative now with allied races and just trying all kinds of different little things that before it would have taken them like a whole expansion worth of designing a new character, like a new
no doubt.
new race. So I mean, maybe in future, but it's just interesting. It's been speculated that there'll be a playable race for so very long now, and I think that's the takeaway everyone has, which is if you even look at it in the WoW model viewer, you can see that just to animate the lower half would just take so long. So.
Oh yeah, and plus you lose mounts. You lose flying mounts. All this stuff has to be like if you do a cool flying mount, then the Naga don't get it. Even if they have some type of mechanic that lets the Naga, who knows, fly through the air or something like that. That's a different animation. They can do that, but all those cool mounts, they won't really work with the Naga to like. I don't know. Maybe they can wrap their tail around it or something, but. I would predict demons before Naga.
Yeah, you did mention that in the book, demons, and the only downside to that was the like having spikes and things protruding out. That might
right. The wings would be horrible. I mean, they hated the Tauren. The horns on the Tauren were hell for the items guys. All the artists, they did everything, and they always left the helmets last because they didn't want to customize, because they all have to be tweaked. It doesn't just magically fit from a gnome to a night elf to a tauren to, you know, they all have to be tweaked a little bit here and there. And they're very finicky about the animations, like when you're falling and their arms are raised, through the shoulder pads clip into the head, you know, that's got to be tweaked. So yeah, these are the things that, you know, they care about.
Yeah, so you'd have to really want it to be in the game for you to basically give yourself more of a job later on to like keep adapting everything to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's diminishing returns too, because
Yeah.
like, you know, once it's an old race, it's not a new race, but still you have to make a second armor set and a second, you know, animation. It's you lose a lot of bang for the buck. So luckily they're looking at things for the long haul.
So I thought it was pretty crazy to hear in the book that the Dark Portal was. I know it's just like basically a doodad that you could just move around easily, but
Yeah.
it was in Teldrassil, and then it was in Ajara, and actually
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but there's still a Dark Portal like sunken in the water in Ajara, and people kept speculating that it was like a Queen Ajara dungeon or a raid, or it might be the entrance to the Ajara crater battleground or something. And then they put it in Blasted Lands.
Yeah. Yeah, there was nothing going on in the Blasted Lands. That's I think honestly. Oh, Blizzard's gonna hate me for saying this, but honestly, stuff like that sometimes gets forgotten. You know, I mean, that's totally like the lore of a computer game is so revered. It almost feels. It's almost like a spoiler to tell computer game fans that if they figure out that dragon animations don't work, then, you know, Metzin's like, fuck it, then we won't have dragons in the game, you know. And that's the way it has to be. It has to be. And that's to like, I know Chris Metzin's not there, but that was always to his credit. Metzin was started out as an artist and an animator. He understands development. You get a lot of people in the gaming industry that do not. They are more, some of them are academics, often friends of the studio head, and sometimes they're science fiction writers, or they pull them in. And let me tell you, it's never good because they have to. Lore is the easiest and the cheapest thing to change. There are so many balls in the air when it comes to technology. It has to be flexible. And so if they figure out that, oh, wait, we can't actually get the ziggurat to fly above the zones in the world because it falls out of the far clip setting, then, you know, that doesn't happen. Then then it just becomes, and it's one of the things I built Naxxramas. I kind of took it over from someone who had left the company. I built the flying component as well from Naxxramas, and the size disparity is like 10-1. You know, like it's the TARDIS type of effect. But luckily, I think they made that a special case where you could see that across the zone, and so far away things don't appear, but you could flag them. But yeah, it's weird how lore just has to always take a back seat sometimes.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You did have a chapter talking about story in games and how it usually does take a back seat because it's kind of like the last thing you can put in, and usually the experience people have is that adventure, like of them being in the world and experiencing basically more of like a picture that tells a story rather than having tons of dialogue and all that stuff. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you basically, like, obviously, lore sets the team in a direction, and that's the way it should be. But you don't want a creative director that wants lore to trump everything. Because that's when you start not getting a lot of bang for the buck, trying to make the lore work. When a simple switch of, oh, it's not a Dragonets and Mana Core, and then save the development team maybe 2 months worth of man hours, you know. It sets the pace for the team. The team has to be energized by the lore. They got to like the lore. People, you know, they'll question it. You know, everyone's a creative person in game development, and then when there's problems, lore is agile. You know, they'll change things. You know, when something happens that's real cool with water, you know, they'll add ships to Warcraft 3. You know, that'll be a cool thing. And then, well, what's the aquatic races going on with Warcraft 3? You know, so it's not all super dictatorial, you know, hopefully. I don't even know who's doing the lore for Warcraft anymore now that Metzen's gone, to be honest.
I think last time I saw they had a writer's room. They just had Christy Golden come in for it as well. I'm not specifically, I don't specifically know if that team is in charge of all the lore. All I know is that they're in charge of the writing side of things.
Okay. Yeah.
It's quite common in TV shows and that kind of thing to have the writer's room now instead of just having kind of writers solo doing everything.
Yeah. No, Metzen was, when I was there, he did everything himself. Like he did Diablo, Warcraft, Starcraft, you know, Ghost at the time. It was all him, and you know, but I'm sure it was split up because he was hard to get a hold of a lot of the times.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny reading about how he, when they were talking about Wailing Caverns, and his idea was just like, yeah, it's just like dinosaurs with like grass and stuff. I thought that was funny. The boss area was like just a room from a movie. I can't remember which one though.
The 13th Warrior. He would just go, you know, straight up 13th Warrior. You got the vibe, and once we had the vibe, then he'd go, thumbs up. Do you need any for anything else? No, and then he'd be off. Like he'd do the minutes. He'd always kick off like the dungeon meeting for like maybe 10 minutes to a half hour, the longest, and then he would just run to his next thing. But you know, sometimes we try to pump him for information. Like I remember one time we were doing Ankarash. This was a desert zone, Silithus, insect creatures, and he had this idea. Oh, there's going to be like a conical. What do they call those? The trapdoor spider type of things, where there's a cone of sand, and they're fighting this giant thing that comes out of the sand, and that's just, you know, just a beast. You know, nothing big. And one of the designers asked him, "What's the name of that beast?" And he's like, I don't know, fucking Mongo. Just make something up. It doesn't matter. Just make something up, run it by me later. I don't need the details now, you know. Mongo.
Yeah, you did mention that Anchorage was, I think, one of your least favorites to work on.
Without a doubt. It was my first one. I didn't know how to build. It had been because a dungeon level designer works hand in hand with a texture artist. Now, at the time, we didn't have any texture artists. And so I was actually, no, we did have one, but he was buried. We had 5 level designers and 1 guy painting textures. And, you know, he's applying textures to see. It was just we were all learning at the time. No one had built with 3ds Max, which was the tool that we switched to. Thank God. Yeah. Ankarash was wholly unsuitable for combat. We had no idea how many players were going to be. I think the designers always wanted the game to be more like Diablo than EverQuest. For the reason that in EverQuest, you see a mob, you walk up to this monster, and you stand next to it, and like if you're a warrior, okay, yeah, you're going to do some spin moves, but you're just chopping at something. Chop, 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 chop. And it's not as interesting looking as Diablo. I mean, for visuals, Diablo blows everything away, you know, because there's multiple creatures attacking, and that was a thing that they never could figure out, and they tried a lot of times, but they fell back toward the EverQuest model, I think.
Yeah, Diablo has a lot of Dynasty Warriors kind of like waves of stuff coming at you just constantly.
Right. Yeah, exciting moments. The problem with that is that I think when you have that many things attacking, it's a lot of damage at the beginning of the fight,
Mm.
and they couldn't temper that down. Um, uh, they couldn't temper that down, and so if you ever accidentally pull another, group of monsters, they would have to behave in groups. Then you'd get wiped out too easily.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's because all the monsters attack you all at once. Whereas if they had some kind of like if they didn't clip into each other in order to attack you, if they were like kind of queued
right.
up, then it would be okay. But yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So just before you mentioned kind of, and this is also in the book about people kind of schmoozing their way into decision-making roles like salespeople, marketing executives, and
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh
I
yeah.
just wanted to ask, do you still, because this was back in 2000 or the early 2000s, do you think it's still a major problem in 2018?
It's a bigger problem,
Oh well.
without a doubt. Without a doubt, and it's because there's more money. There's more
Hmm.
money involved. It's the problem is that game development, computer game development, you really need to prototype stuff, and a publisher has a ton of money, and it takes a ton of money to make a game really polished because it just takes more people. It's shocking the burn rate that games cost, and the amount of money just means they have to have more oversight. That means more executives, means more executives making decisions. And now I don't know if Blizzard's like that. Blizzard's
Hmm.
very different now than what I wrote the book. This is pre-WoW Blizzard, where when we have when we had birthdays, we all met. The whole company met together, and
Hmm.
Mike Morheim, he put a big old rainbow wig on, and he read out the birthdays, and it was a big group. The company was 200 people. Now there's thousands of people in
Yeah.
multiple buildings. You know, so.
Um,
But is that kind of like what you were asking, or?
yeah. I was just curious
Yeah.
because yeah, I mean, I only just read today that the Fire Emblem mobile game it's made like $400 million, and that's like more than the entire series previous to that. That's because they went from like consoles to phones. And so yeah, I imagine that, and that game is basically just kind of a gacha machine simulator with characters. So yeah, I was just
Yeah.
just kind of curious if that's changed or not.
No, the small one, like you can never tell. There's going to be the Minecrafts out there. There's going to be somebody who's going to just develop something that's going to blow up into something different.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's so much. There's growing pains. Blizzard. Every company goes through growing pains.
For
They
sure.
all. Everyone wants to run a company, a mom and pop shop, but when you get to 70 employees, and you got to run things differently, and Blizzard's different now than as I describe them in the book. It's they have to be, it's it, communication is harder. The team, in fact, WoW changed as like over the arc of the first 4 years. The WoW team dynamics changed when there were so many people in the company. Everybody couldn't go out to lunch. We were always going to the Hard Rock Cafe, right? The blandest food that we could, but it's the only place that could seat everybody. So when we had tables for 20 people, we'd have to go to the Hard Rock Cafe. But when the team gets so big, then the departments start hanging out by themselves and going to lunch by themselves. Then you lose that cross departmental pollination of what one hand doesn't know precisely what the other hand is doing, and it's easier to misunderstand and sometimes even blame other departments when that's happening. And that's just the nature of a large organization.
Yeah, you did mention in the book that some social groups kind of drifted apart, and once the company grew to a certain size, and you also mentioned how pizza got awful after about 4 years straight of it twice a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely my editorial. I
Hmm.
wasn't alone in hating pizza, but I remember like it would be 7 o'clock at night. I haven't eaten since 12:30. I would be so hungry, and the smell of pizza, it was a stench by late in because I get it. When you eat pizza twice a week, every single week, year after year, you get really sick of that
Yeah.
food. And whenever they got something else, but no, I would smell that pizza and I'd eventually hunger got the better of me. And I'd go over to the table and there'd be all the pizzas laying out there. I'd pick up a paper plate, look at it, and then I would just feel my hunger abate and just go away. And I'd say, well, I guess I can go back to work. And I'd put the paper plate back down and I'd go back to my desk and start working again. But sometimes that's just, yeah, pizza there's a limit to pizza. That's for sure.
It's a limit to anything. If you have it twice a week, like for years, there's no way you could not be sick of it. I can't think of a single
Oh
thing.
yeah. Yeah, and a limit to Warcraft, honestly. By the end of the project, we were like sitting around, like when we'd have the food actually got better, I think, after the alpha and the beta and the internal. Once the company knew, holy moly, people are addicted to this game. Okay, because there was a lot of worries because there's a lot of delays. We could never test dungeons until the very tail end of the game. That even some of the upper management, they were like, wow, is this going to be the game that really doesn't quite bankrupt Blizzard, but if the project ever got canceled, then there'd be a whole lot of layoffs, watching the company fall in two pieces because so once we were proven, then they upped the budget for food, and they could go to get ribs and spaghetti and some really nice food. It was so much better, but we got tired of talking about World of Warcraft because we were how many years working on it. That's the only thing people talked about at lunchtime, and we were just thinking. We would be sitting there quietly, sometimes at lunchtime. I usually ate with the quest designers. And we'd sit around and we would joke, well, there's nothing going on in our lives other than World of Warcraft. There's nothing to talk about. I mean, if you go to lunch with the programmers, you're talking about cars. That's basically what the programmers, they're engineers. They want to talk about the metal in the pistons or whatever. I'm not a car guy, so I don't care about that. But yeah, people got sick of World of Warcraft even. So
Yeah, I get it. To a much lesser extent because it's nowhere near as much work. I've been working on YouTube for like 4 or 5 years straight, and yeah, sometimes like I'm talking to my wife, and like I realize halfway through, I'm like, I'm still talking about YouTube. I've been working on this all day. This is supposed to be a relaxing time. I'm still talking about it. Gotta stop. It's so easy to
yeah.
get so invested in it, and it was actually really nice to hear or to read in the book that yeah, you would spend like time even after work because you're so passionate about getting something into the game, to work even past hours to get it in. That's a really good enthusiasm. Like it's really nice to read about that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it was really good, especially early on. The last year, I'll tell you what, I can't lie, it was not everyone was on board with that. When you're not into MMO games, and I'd say half of the staff, they don't have the patience for that. I mean, you got to take the best developers. You can't wait for the best developer who is also a MMO fan. You would never be able to hire anyone. And that's actually the biggest myth that I thought was shattered my first week on Blizzard, how hard it is to hire people, how incredibly hard it is to aggressively go after. We would scour the internet for, we looked at I'm guessing 60 um, mod developers for level designers,
Hmm.
and no one wanted to come to Blizzard. No one wanted to come to Blizzard. It
Wow.
wasn't a place for 3D level design. It was all because Blizzard was doing RTSs. We were working on an unannounced project, so Yeah, so I don't know how I got onto talking about hiring, but yeah, it's
No,
oh shoot.
that's all good. I mean, that's something that they don't like. No one ever talks about anyway. And so to hear someone specifically go into details about how many people you looked at and how difficult it was and who would turn it away and who would go for it is really interesting to hear. So
Yeah, I mean, I imagined, oh, we're Blizzard. Everybody wants to work for Blizzard.
yeah, yeah.
It's so not true. Like all the best map makers would be other developers just doing stuff for fun on the side. And whenever someone would uh, create a polished Quake map or a polished Unreal map or something really cool, it'd always be a developer that's just doing something fun on the side. And we didn't like rating other companies for employees. That's something that, at least when I was there, they didn't do. But we we'd solicit these guys, and they'd always find out that, oh, they're happy where they are. And developers, for the most part, if they're left alone, they're happy where they are. They don't care about the project or the money. If they
Mm.
can get some creative juice put into their game, you could say we're Blizzard all you want, but they're happy where they are, because in every company there's pockets of good and bad departments. There's always a chance of like, oh no, not on this project. World of Warcraft's horrible.
Mm.
But they don't know that until they come over.
Yeah.
I was pretty nervous moving from Manhattan to Newport Beach. Big change for me, and I didn't know what the game was until I actually made that move. So
Well, change is super scary no matter what industry you're in, and yeah, especially having to move location is double as scary because yeah, you don't know if it's gonna work out. You mentioned your friend moved around companies for like 8 years, didn't ship a game. Like,
oh
that's I
yeah.
guess that's the nightmare people have to contend
Oh,
with.
it's very common. Mark had a like when we would interview level designers, we would Mark Kern would regularly apologize. He would always say, "Well, I apologize on behalf of the industry for the way you've been treated," because he would talk about the Blizzard bonuses that's actually something we pay. This is something that the founders of the company fought for the
Hmm.
people who owned Blizzard. They've always fought to get bonuses going to the employees, and they actually I think I described it in my book. I don't think I'm talking out of
Yeah,
turn.
no, you did.
Yeah, they put their jobs on the line. I mean, after StarCraft, I forget the company. I shouldn't say the company denied the developers bonuses for StarCraft, and StarCraft was the hardest burn in any project in Blizzard, and probably still worse than World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
Uh,
you did mention that they kind of learned from StarCraft when it came to WoW and not burning out devs, and that's why it was looked down upon working after hours.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it was, well, not forcing people to work after hours, and we worked. Most people left for the first 3 years. They worked till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is usually when the Counter Strike servers went up and people played, and then they went home. I usually stayed. I was always I'd work longer hours than anyone else on the team. I'd stayed till like 1 or 2, sometimes midnight. But that was kind of like the sweet spot when it was nice and quiet. Could turn on my music and not bother anybody, and
Hmm.
zone out.
So you mentioned that. Well, it's actually kind of funny to hear about the kind of developer priority list and having to ninja things into the game, that kind of thing. Um, my company that developed a game recently, a mobile game, and I kind of learned about that priority list, kind of the hard way of putting all these
Oh
ideas on the list, and then you start to have to sort it like this is the thing I really want in, and the things at the bottom are never ever gonna go in. You still put them in.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, like yeah.
but because you had Moradon and the battlegrounds, and they were all late, and I was really surprised that Karazhan was intended for launch because that came out in the BC.
Yeah, I worked on Karazhan in the year 2000. That
Ah,
was when we were working with a Radiant. Yeah, Karazhan had been built uh twice.
jeez.
Both times, I mean, from Radiant, I think we threw out maybe about 5 months worth of work on Karazhan. A couple years later, another developer built it from scratch and submitted it to the designers, and it was too small. Like all the rooms were way too small because the concept was a super tall tower. And so that doesn't leave a lot of floor space because stairs, every level designer hates stairs because they just eat up the floor space. You can't do a whole lot of stuff when you have lots of stairs. And they said, no, this is not big. It's not big enough. We have to make it much bigger. And the level designer, I won't tell you who he was. He just sized up the whole thing uniformly and so there you go. And it felt like you were a little mouse running around in this giant's castle. Like there were stairs like you couldn't even jump up because they were so. And the designer's like and then they had another concept meeting. They finally did this. Okay, Karazhan was going to be the spire with towers that were going to rotate around it. It was a super magical tower. That was the concept. And then I wasn't in on that meeting. I would have told them that the programmers would have vetoed that because we couldn't get pathing to work for moving objects at the time. And so, they canceled that. And then a couple months later, that's when it fell to me. I started again Karazhan, I think while the game was going gold. That was probably when I started Karazhan that you see the version of it today. I'd laid out the tower. I'm very happy with the way Karazhan turned out. And even though we had cut it down to it's right now a third of what it was, and it's ridiculously big right now.
Yeah, you should definitely be proud of it. That's one of my favorite raids, and I'm sure a lot of people can say the exact same thing. It's got so much personality in it. So
yeah, and it's got a lot of lore. It's actually easier to do stuff when it has a lot of lore. You can do a lot of cool stuff. Like my concept was to have. Now, actually, I didn't model it out entirely. I sculpted the exterior, and once I got to the base. I had the whole layout, and then Aaron Keller, another level designer, he took over, and I worked on a raid that was supposed to be at the end, at the top of Karazhan. You were supposed to port over to this asteroid that's in space. Like when you get to the top of Karazhan, you see the space scene that's inside. Wow. You actually port to this little island, and I think it's still floating there. That's actually this weird island, but it was so big already. The designers are just no way. It's way too much. And it's my concept was to have this I think it was a demon. There's a demon named Mal'Ganis who was originally going to be there. And Mal'Ganis was I imagined him. This is when The Cell came out. That Vince Vaughn movie, and that scene where the main bad guy is walking down the stairs, and he's got this cape that wraps around the entire room. I loved the idea of an antagonist that was almost embedded in his surroundings. Wow. And so I wanted the demon Mal'Ganis to be playing Phantom of the Opera style on this giant pipe organ that would wind through the entire tower. And as the players are going through the tower, they hear this pipe organ going on. And when they get to the end, that's Mal'Ganis. But Medson's like, nah, our demons do not sit around and play musical instruments. I was like, oh,
that's a sick idea there. That would be
great. But way out in the weeds. I'd never seen demons. I think they were almost a race in Warcraft 3 at one point. They were gonna do I think 5 races. I think demons were one of the races, and they cut them when they realized, holy crap, it's hard enough to make asynchronous sides with 4, let alone 5. So but no, they had a solid idea of what demons were gonna be, and so they went with it. So good for them.
So can you, because you designed the exterior of Karazhan, can you clear up this really old myth that The inside the crypts where you have the bodies hanging upside down, did they close that off because
Oh
of censorship, or was it just random?
no! Oh my God, that is so funny. Yeah, I built all those. Okay,
Yeah.
so I built a whole bunch of. This is when I was just jamming on micro dungeons. We call them any of the caves or the crypts that are non-instanced. We called it a micro dungeon. I don't even know what players call them, but yeah, I was building. I was out of ideas, and I'm thinking, okay, think crypts. How else can you do crypts? I had wine cellars down in there because the mills are underground, and I took that from. I even labeled it from the what's the Kurt Russell movie? The hell of the third, the hell, the upside down hell. Big Trouble in Little China.
Oh yeah.
Okay, there's a scene where he falls in this water and it's a bunch of people tied to chains and they've been submerged and he's like, getting out of there. I wanted to do a little tribute of that, and I thought it was super creepy, and so I actually named the room that. And once I was sitting there working, and outside my office in the hallway, that's where the localizers worked. And those are the guys who translated WoW into different languages. And we'd have Korean would have been the time, and apparently I had just made up names. And if Metzen wanted to change the names on stuff, that was kind of like the process. But this stuff, uh, it just shows up on a list of stuff. Like a text list, like they don't go walking around in game and naming things. They just a field, like when I say this room is the hell of the upside down, warriors or whatever the name was, that just shows up on a text file. And I remember Metzen being called over, looking at it and going, "What the heck? I don't know. I don't know who made that name up." And I'm listening to this while he's doing it, but he thinks that I knew it had been killed. And so there's no point. There's no way players are going to get down there, right? I didn't. So I didn't bother to change it. And I was listening to Metz and go, "Well, that's not part of this lore. I don't know who's changing that, but yeah, you just get rid of it, delete it." Like, oh my gosh. I never fessed up to that. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's a really good story actually. Really enjoyed hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the rumors aren't true. It's not haunted. It's not.
No. Well, the haunt is that it wasn't approved. Some of the, I was building a whole bunch of races. I'm releasing an article about the Scholomance. I built the Scholomance the same way. And I was building micro dungeons, and in that instance, it had changed from a micro dungeon to a instance.
Oh, nice.
Like the designer's like, "Oh, this is so cool. We got to make this a real dungeon. Can you add a couple rooms?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So, and this will be in the article in greater detail. This is a promo article for my book about how the artists were kind of upset that they had been left out of the loop. I'd just been creating. I'd been given a license to just create stuff completely off the schedule. And I was that prolific that there's only me and another guy that had that license. That as long as it doesn't slow down anybody else, and as long as they're going to reject stuff like the tombs and the crypts beneath Karazhan, that I could create stuff, and that's the stuff that got axed. They didn't have enough content. Like that's when Jeff Kaplan was like, "We don't have enough loot to give to people." Like all these crypts and stuff, they had asked for them. But then when they realized, like when they speed up the leveling curve, that players don't need to kill monsters in micro dungeons under Karazhan. They're already 60. There's no incentive because everything's a loot incentive. That is one of the biggest limitations in an MMO is the amount of rewards you can give to players that are meaningful to them. You don't want to give duplicate rewards or stuff that's redundant because then that's just kind of like, eh. But yeah, I'd created more work than what they could use, which is a good problem. No other MMO actually had that problem. Then they didn't have too much content. So yeah, that's the story with those micros.
Yeah, incentivizing content can sometimes be as almost as challenging as making the content, even though it should just be the simplest thing. Um,
Yeah.
just to kind of go through some of the other notes just real quick before we wrap up. So I saw that early in development they were thinking about doing a Rune Master class. Do you know if that's still
Yeah.
going to be a thing at all?
Oh gosh. Well, those designers have all moved on to other projects. So those were just, when they're brainstorming, they're trying to make the classes distinct. Some of those had came out and said, "Oh, we've got 30 classes," but they would just basically be the same caster class reskinned with different color particle effects, and they'd say, "Oh, that's a different class." But what they no Rune Master, that stuff is
I guess
probably long forgotten.
just
Yeah.
yeah, top of their head, just like coming up with ideas.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just they would throw everything down just to make sure they're not passing up an opportunity.
Sure.
Like some person will come up like for a shaman, totems are the thing. That's the mini game. You're placing down totems on the ground, and that's the thing with the shaman. The druid never worked out. They imagined someone shape shifting between forms, and I had I was playing a druid, and so I was like, no, it doesn't. They don't play like that. You're charging too much mana to switch forms. No one's gonna do that. So yeah, not everything worked out, but yeah,
Well,
Rune Master never gonna come. Yeah.
I was surprised to hear that the idea of artifacts like came from you, and I was happy to see that it made it in Legion,
Oh,
even if you didn't get a chance
no.
to play it.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, it just did not come from me.
Oh yeah.
My no, God, no. I was pitching something that was the idea of something I was trying to translate because in Dungeons and Dragons, artifacts are rare, and just knowing that they're out there is kind of cool.
Mm.
But it just doesn't work in an MMO because Dungeons and Dragons is the entire world as an instance for 5 or 6 people. When you have a collective community, you can't have a super rare thing out there because all the development that you put into that artifact doesn't actually resonate to all the people. One could be on just one guy's character. So my idea was actually very terrible. And of course, let me tell you, between me and Legion's form of artifacts, I actually have friends who are playing artifacts or Legion, love Legion, and I hear a lot about the artifacts. And between Legion and my idea of artifacts, I'm guessing there were probably 25 pitches of what to do with artifacts. That this is the version of what they go. Yeah, game ideas are very, very common. Yeah, so
Yeah. Well,
nothing special about me.
I mean, I started playing back when I was a teenager, and yeah, the even just the vague idea of there being some kind of like different colored item, like a weapon or something that only a very small percentage of players could get was very enticing. But yeah, I do agree. It doesn't entirely work with a world that big.
Yeah. It's...
So you, this is just like a quick note in the book, but I thought
sure.
I have to bring it up.
Yeah.
It's the idea of an Australia convict server.
Oh yeah.
Where if players break the law, they get sent there, and there's no support from GM staff and stuff. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, they were just figuring out, they're just spitballing, just throwing ideas, seeing if they stick, to the wall, see if anything like resonates. That was one of the funny ones that, like when our designers, they'd go to GDC and they'd listen to people talk about, oh, I don't know, player housing or something. And even if like all the ideas they're talking about or solutions to the concepts they're talking about don't work or wouldn't work for WoW, that gets people's imagination going. Like, how could that possibly work? So someone just came up with that idea of, for all the malcontents, the filthy, the worst players that are just unredeemable, the griefers. We don't know. I mean, that was at the time we didn't know if we could stop griefing. Is there a way to, because it hadn't been done before. I mean, it really hadn't been done before. There was no such game that, to my knowledge, that had stopped griefing. And we were, well, in the case that we can't stop griefing, what do we do about it to protect our player base? We don't want to just cancel those accounts, because, when you cancel a Diablo account, nobody cares. When you cancel a subscription account, which we were paranoid at the time that we wouldn't get enough people subscribing to WoW. That was another paradigm shift. We didn't think we would get 500,000 subscribers in North America. That was as many copies that we'd sold, but proved otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lot of foreshadowing in the book about people predicting all kinds of things that were completely wrong.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, good.
Oh, my first day on the job. Okay, this is a great story. I don't think this is in the book. Shane is actually no, I did put it in the book. Shane is explaining to me how people might play WoW locally. And when they want to play, when I mean locally, they're not connected to the Blizzard servers. They would just play, like, if they want to solo, they could quest and solo by themselves, kind of like Diablo. When they want to play with their friends and do a dungeon, then they would connect to the Blizzard servers, because they were really, really paranoid about paying too much bandwidth. Bandwidth is one of the big expenses. I think at the time, EverQuest was 1/4 of San Diego's entire bandwidth. And we were worried about, the implication is, like, are we going to just spend buttloads of, because that eats away from, profit margin. And Sean Cash was like, no. And this is Shane, by the way, at the time, Shane DeBerry, he was the team lead at the time, explaining to the new hire, who they would hope they were all hoping for me to solve all their building problems with their architecture. So they were super psyched to have me on the team. And John Cash is behind Shane, just shaking his head and smiling. And then Shane turns around and says, well, what do you mean? Like, why are you shaking your head? John had thought about that long enough to tell Shane, no, we can't do that. We can't put anything on the client that's going to be, can't put pathing data. We can't put items. We can't put monster AI. Nothing goes on the client, because it's all hackable. And Shane turns around to me and says, well, I guess we won't do that. I wish everything were that easy to decide. But yeah.
Well, you mentioned in early WoW there was an in-game collectible card game prototype, like cards dropping from monsters and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Just wanted to ask, was this somewhat of an inspiration for Hearthstone, or was it completely unrelated?
I think, boy, we were all big Magic the Gathering fans. We had tournaments. We had a lot of good players on the team, and that had actually come from somebody at Blizzard North, just made a little mini game. It was a card game at the time, but they were pitching the idea of putting it in World of Warcraft, where rares could drop off of mobs. And it was like, we liked the idea because it was cool to have a game inside of a game. Like EverQuest had something called Gems, but we weren't going to force it on people, meditating or anything. But it was kind of cool to integrate the idea of having a game within a game, two people sitting down and playing a different game while inside of World of Warcraft. It was kind of an idea. I think, well, that translated to, I think it stuck with Eric Dodds. Eric Dodds was the guy behind. He's very humble. He won't take credit, as much credit as he deserves for Hearthstone. But Eric, who had done our trade skills, was the design lead for Hearthstone. Basically, a lot of resistance in the company against Hearthstone. The idea of Blizzard releasing a non-AAA title was kind of the idea that he was fighting, and he had this stick-to-itiveness to actually prove, hey, look, this is really good gameplay. This is a really good game. That had actually happened after our card game had flopped. We had done, you remember the, I can't even remember what it was called, the card game that was very close to how Hearthstone plays. It was a CCG that Blizzard had licensed to a company across the street, but it just didn't work. Boy, what was that game called?
Was it a digital game or was it physical?
No, it was a physical game. It was a card game.
I recall there were a bunch of board games, and I would not be shocked if that was a real thing.
No, it came, and it had seen a couple of series. No, it hung around and we had played it, but it just wasn't as good as Magic the Gathering. It just wasn't as interesting. And so after a couple years of it making cards, we canceled it, and Eric said, hey, you know what? We can do this digitally. We love Magic the Gathering. No one has really done it well for the computer. And it's, the proof of concept is there. People like CCGs. And there's a couple ones. There's Hex, there's Magic the Gathering Online, that the interface just wasn't as efficient. And I remember Eric, after Hearthstone, he was saying, this is Eric's baby. He says his design advice was cut, just cut out ideas, just cut down to and that is very Eric Dodds. He's a very good designer. Just the bare essentials. That's what the game should be. And so I don't know. The answer is I don't know, but we've all talked about it regularly. We wanted to actually play a game inside of WoW.
Yeah, kind of like pet battles these days, where you're basically playing a one-on-one kind of Pokemon simulator in
there
WoW.
You go. Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, I'm just gonna wrap up. But
yeah.
one question. In the end, was it worth animating individual fingers on characters?
Oh my goodness, that is the eternal question. That was the eternal question. I think not. I actually think not. Imagine being able to have twice as many players on the screen.
Yeah,
that's the trade-off. Or twice as many dungeons, or better yet, a farther draw distance for like busy areas. That's kind of the trade-off with, like, it's cool to have individual fingers, but when you have half as many people on the screen, I was there at the event for Ankarash when the gates opened. Oh my goodness. That was painful. I mean, it was, so Ankarash would have been a lot better if everybody's little fingers hadn't been, but actually that had gotten optimized after WoW had shipped. That was one of the things. So I don't know if it was as expensive as it was while we were making vanilla WoW, but yeah, those little fingers were enough guys were barely passionate enough about that to really convince the producers, okay, all right, let's try to 5 fingers. Let's see if we can do it. So
that is hilarious. I'm just imagining these days if a developer came out and said asked the player base, would you guys rather have individual fingers or an entire raid dungeon, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And who knows? Like I don't play WoW now, so maybe they have done something with. Well, you could do stuff like pointing. Was more. You can't point as easy when you have mitten hands. So there's some things like saluting might look better. Actually, no, that probably looks the same with mitten hands. Who knows?
Well, it's completely different these days because they've got the new character models and everything's optimized.
That's true.
Yeah, so they're all good there.
That's true.
So you predicted a 20-year run for the game, and we're getting close to that. Do you think it'll keep going after 2024?
I totally think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally think so. Yeah, I mean, the list of stuff, like even it's okay that, look at Final Fantasy. It's a different game every time they do it. They've everyone's making up their own little mini games for something. Um, like the art direction is different. A lot of the things are different. It's a lot more realistic now. Um, and that's great. I think it's great that the game evolves, and the team that's working on it now, they have ownership on it. So
Hmm. Um, so I was questing through Dark Shore not too long ago, and you might know about this. I don't know.
yeah.
But I found a Worgen who had a very particular name. Do you know about this?
Oh yeah, yeah. Eric, my buddy Eric Maloof, he named a Worgen after me, Jonathan Stats. Yeah, good old Jonathan's still there.
Yeah, I just came across it randomly, and it took me a second. It took me aback because I wasn't expecting it. Just to sit standing there, I was wondering if maybe you had input in the design of the Worgen, or if it was just
Oh no, no, it's just a one-off. Like that's a Eric's a quest designer. I think he's the lead quest designer. Actually, I don't know if that's true or not, but Eric's been there for a long time, and he, when you're coming up with hundreds of names, you just pull them out of old
of course.
roommates, old college friends, references to pets. I think I'm in the game a couple times. I think they named a bunch of kids running around in Stormwind. Let's see,
Ah,
Dana, Cameron, John, Jose, and Aaron. I think they're, unless, of course, they redid Stormwind, so they might have had to wipe all the spawns. So I don't know if the kids are still there, but yeah, they would just, and it's only our first name, so nobody knows about it except the developers, and it's not a big deal to us. So
okay, well that's about all the questions I had. I'm really honored that you talked to me and discussed all this, and again, I really loved reading the book. It's an incredible piece. It's basically one of a kind. Um,
okay.
so I was just wondering if you wanted to do just a promo to let people know about what's going to be happening soon.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. By the way, this is a lot of fun to talk about. My name is John Staats, and I'm launching a Kickstarter, ostensibly August 28th. We'll see whether or not that date holds. I don't know whether or not I can weather the Blizzard PR blitz for BFA, but I've got an ebook, PDF, and I also have signed copies of the WoW Diary. They're going to show up on Kickstarter. Um, Check it out. I can guarantee it. This is going to be your go-to coffee table book. This is not a lot of companies. Blizzard was pretty brave to actually say, yeah, let's thumbs up this. This is kind of cool. So
Yeah, that's
appreciate that.
extremely amazing of them to help you out with that. So
Yeah, something they didn't need to do, but it's a great company. So
okay, well, I'll have links for that down below. So thanks again, John, and I hope your Kickstarter is a success.
thanks, Dolan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.